I feel like George Bush when he's like, fool me once, never fool me again. Okay, let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. My name is Mike Perrine. This is the Everyday Detox podcast. And on this episode, I told myself I'm not going to overthink it. I'm not going to edit it. I'm not going to start and stop 15 times, although I might have started and stopped a couple of times already. But I'm not going to do that too much because I tend to overthink these podcasts. And really what it is it's a desire for excellence. So whenever you see any of the podcasts in the past, and the first podcast aired in May 2014, so almost 10 years ago. We're like 9.5 years, 9.75 years. We're getting closer to 10 years. And I put a lot of effort into it. Everything from, if you see me doing like a live event in front of a room, everything from the invites to setting up to the microphones to cameras, everything, all the post-production stuff, any graphics you see, cutting, editing, all that stuff, it's just all me doing it. And I wanted these to be excellent when I first started doing them. I started it 10 years ago when I used to listen to different podcasts, particularly the Joe Rogan podcast, because that was one of the first big ones. And I would be doing the books, doing charts and stuff for one of my businesses, colon hydrotherapy practices. And I would just sort of let that roll in the background. And then I learned, they post these on YouTube and they film them too, and they're 2 hours long. So I would kind of let that roll and then I can see the person. So I was I didn't want it to be, I wasn't trying to make it like professional studio quality, but I know what really bad quality stuff looks like. And I didn't want people to watch it and just be like, ugh, this is so hard to watch, right? Although I will tell you something. The first podcast that I did, I taped iPhones. I always film my podcasts on iPhones, by the way. But I taped iPhones to step ladders and to a drying rack, a laundry drying rack. And somebody, I don't know if I think I have a picture of it somewhere. Sitting at a little table in one of my apartments in Brooklyn with somebody took a picture from way back, and there's duct tape and stuff, taped phones, it's hysterical. But I tried to make it look really smooth on the other side. And of course, if you look at the early video footage on YouTube from 10 years ago, you're going to see a definite difference in quality because iPhones have really, they've increased in picture quality so much in 10 years, incredibly. Everything is so beautiful now, and it light corrects and all that stuff. But anyway, told myself I'm not going to overthink this podcast, and I'm just going to sort of let it roll. And this is also going to be a shorter podcast. Before we start, I just want to thank everyone that's ever watched or listened to one of these podcasts. It really means the world to me. I started these podcasts just so I can share conversations that I would have with my mentors and friends and colleagues like Gil Jacobs and Dr. Fred Bitchy. And of course, I had all sorts of different guests over the past 10 years. And I've done a couple of solo ones as well. And the world of holistic wellness is pretty big. It's a big deal. Gwyneth Paltrow and that whole crowd, and the yoga crowd, and the essential oils crowd, and the medical medium crowd. It's a pretty big place. But the way that we're into the work of wellness and healing and inner and natural living, the cleansing life, as Gil Jacobs calls it, it's a pretty radical small group of people that really understand this, that understand the work of Professor Arnold Ehret, that are willing to do the body work necessary to really magnify the value of the lifestyle, So I appreciate all of you that find this as fascinating as I always have through my whole life. And there's one way that you can really help this podcast, and no, it's not go down below and spend money and click and do things like that. It's to subscribe on whatever podcast app you're listening to, and to like and subscribe on YouTube. It helps so much because then it tells those systems that this is something important and this is something valuable, and then it gets recommended to more people. And when you do something as a labor of love like I have, and you don't get paid anything to make any of these things, it's really wonderful when a lot more people are listening. And just, I want to thank everyone because, we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of thousands of downloads on these podcasts and YouTube views and, over the past 10 years. And I appreciate it so much. And I would love to get the message out there and get more people connected to the podcast. And if you want to support this podcast, you can go down to the description. You can visit us at Everyday Detox Academy. Gil Jacobs' masterclass on deep tissue cleansing just released. And we're having I set up a masterclass bundle. So eliminating the toxic load and Gil Jacobs' masterclass on deep tissue cleansing, all for the price of one course. So if you're someone that's kind of been you don't know if you want to take the course or not, well, now you can get two for the price of one. It's now's the time to strike while the iron is hot. Also, you can support this podcast by clicking the link below and purchasing some Velasta astaxanthin. If you've not seen my podcast with Sam Shepard, go check that one out. It's 2 podcasts ago. I forgot the number. I think it's number 41. And that was a fantastic podcast. So check that one out. Anyway, so on today's podcast, this is what I want to discuss. There's been some really cool communications over the years, probably a lot of lost opportunities on social media where people will ask me something and I'll get into it with them. And then I'll think, oh, this is such a great podcast or, Instagram Reels or a TikTok idea. But then I never get to make it or do it, right? Because it kind of gets lost in the moment. And then I go home and I'm dealing with life and kids and things. And that's it, right? So I started writing things down. And I wanted to discuss some of these things in some of these shorter podcasts. One thing I was asked recently in an Instagram direct message it was basically the equivalent. I don't remember how they worded it, but don't you ever cheat? I had posted a picture of some really beautiful food, I think. And they were looking at it, and I think they've probably been watching me do this for years or months or whatever. And they said, do you ever cheat? Do you ever go out of your parameters and do anything? Now, the short answer is no, I don't. Absolutely not. And that could be a little bit intimidating for people and maybe confusing to some people or sound horrible to some people. But I want to assure everyone that doesn't come from rigidity around food. And I want to explain a little bit how all that works, Food cravings and food drama and food trauma are a huge deal for people in holistic health. I deal with this all day when I'm doing one-on-one nutritional coaching. A lot of it is people trying to exist in a world that's not set up for their success when it comes to nourishing foods and clean foods. I mean, that food's available. You can go to Whole Foods, you can go to a farmer's market, it's there. But once you get on an airplane and go to a resort or travel for work or go to your family's thing and there's a party, unless you're self-responsible and prepared, a lot of that stuff's not available. You're not going to get on an airplane and get an organic meal that's, 70% raw with a little bit of whole grain. It's just, I've never seen anything like that that's any quality that anybody wants, right? Not yet, anyway. Maybe we'll see that one day. But a lot of people lose track once they travel or go to a place, or once it's out of their control, or they want to give over their control. It's sort of, the world's not set up for you. It's just not. There's a lot of effort into going to that place to get the good food, right? And that's enjoyable for a lot of people. But you see a lot of this food drama because they kind of want to exist in this world. A lot of them have some deep food cravings. People want to change. Same thing with fitness and running or cold plunging, right? We see the people doing it online and we're like, fuck yeah, let's go, let's do it. And then when it comes time to do it, sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge because we're pleasure-seeking creatures. And we're always looking to seek pleasure and escape pain. And sometimes the pain of actually, getting into an ice bath or going to a gym or putting in the work or eating broom salads and things like that when you'd much rather be eating a pepperoni pizza, sometimes the pain of that is greater than the pain of actually sitting in this body or state or whatever it is that we don't like, that we want to change and make healthier. And I think Tony Robbins has said, and probably a lot of personal development teachers have said, when the pain, I feel like George Bush when he's like, fool me once, never fool me again. But when the pain of one thing becomes greater than the pain of the other, that's when we make the change. So where was I going with this? Okay, so what happens is in the initial stages when we're trying to eat clean and we're used to processed food and we're used to things that are highly stimulating and they act like drugs and they light up those pleasure centers in our brain, which refined sugars, refined flours, dairy products, they all do that. They create a real feel-good experience in the body. Now, it doesn't feel so good physically after for a lot of people, and there's a crash, but that's the way it is with a lot of drugs. But when we're in that cycle and we're trying to eat clean food, we have two things we have to correct first. First, we have to create new pleasure pathways in the brain, because all those foods light up the same pleasure centers as drugs in the brain. So that's something we have to really work on. We have to start doing a nice transitional replacement therapy. That's why I was a vegan pastry chef for so long. I love sweet, decadent things, and we went from, God, I used to eat like Carvel ice cream cake for breakfast in the morning with leftover Chinese food. I don't know if I tell that story on another podcast, but I was in a bad state when I first started. So I went from that and lots of alcohol and, like sugar and things like that. And then I went into like tofu cheesecake and Angelica Kitchen, which was a macrobiotic restaurant, organic farm to table macrobiotic restaurant in the East Village when I first started coming up. I used to work there. I tell a whole story about that. But, I went into that kind of food, organic, but I was still eating some good stuff. It was made with different quality ingredients, and I did really well. And now that has moved over into when I want something decadent, I'll eat like a raw cacao brownie or something like that. So it was never about deprivation. It was always about transitioning out to cleaner, higher quality ingredients that leave less residue in the body. They don't contain poison, and they're easier to digest. And you just move in that direction, and it takes years and it takes time, right? Some people can go fast, but it takes a little while, and you change the what your body is looking for when it's seeking pleasure. You have that bad day. Your body wants to feel good. We're pleasure-seeking creatures. As soon as you go, I had a bad day. I want to feel good. And people go for that big Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks frothy thing, and they get like a donut or a croissant or something. Makes them feel good for 5 minutes, and then they feel horrible. So you want to change it into something where you're like, that hit the spot. I'm still enjoying life. That was absolutely delicious, and I feel great. That's where we want to get. Now, part of that is also the microbiome. So the microbiome exists in relationship to whatever we eat consistently. And if we built a microbiome, let's say it's heavily yeasted, it's going to crave all sorts of refined sugars. And it's sending signals to the brain telling you what to eat. The bacteria in the gut and the yeasts in the gut can tell the brain what it wants and make you crave it, which is absolutely wild. So we need to change that as well. And we do this all through consistency. We change the patterns of what we're looking for when we're looking to feel good. And we change the microbiome so it starts to actually call for things like salad. Like my body calls for raw salad. Like for real, at the end of the day, I'm like thinking about a wonderful salad. In the beginning of the day, I'm really, first thing I do is I crave water and juices and fruits. Like it's not discipline. It's not rigidity when I eat this way. It feels good. I'm enthusiastic about it. I love it. If it were a struggle and it were discipline, I wouldn't have lasted very long doing this. I'm quite an indulgent person. Like I don't think, if I couldn't recreate some delicious flavors, and if I couldn't get through that process of changing my microbiome and changing how my body looks for pleasure with food, and it was a struggle, and every time I passed the pizzeria, I had to like really just like dig deep and like focus and like take deep breaths and walk by and then go eat cucumbers. Like that would suck. I wouldn't do that. So the other part of this is when you do this long enough, not only is it like what you really want and desire for yourself, that you actually become repulsed by that other type of food, but you don't feel good. Like I can't just be like, oh man, it's been almost 30 years I've been eating so clean. What's one night? I'm going to go eat, like just regular like gluten, cheese, melty, dripping pizza. And I'm going to have like, whatever. Like if I just did that, I would feel absolutely horrible. And it actually magnifies the level of damage that food does when you eat clean and do that. There's consequences when somebody eats really clean for a long period of time, or if you do a long juice fast, or if you've done a lot of water fasting, or if you've done the work and then you kind of fall off, your body's going to let you know. If you've made progress on a cellular level, your body's going to be upset when those new challenges or that poison comes in. And it all depends on what it is, of course. I mean, look, if someone hasn't eaten cooked food for a long time and then they start eating some like steamed potatoes or something, you might get mucusy and have a full belly. Like it's not always the end of the world. But when we're talking about like cheating, That's not what people are asking. They're asking like, do you ever just like go do something so out of character? I don't want to not feel well. There's consequences to pay for that. And, the slight little pleasure of eating something that I grew up on or whatever, it's not worth it. So if I ever find myself in a situation where it's like, oh man, there's no food here. We got stuck at some, I'm making up a situation. We got stuck at some hotel because our flight got whatever. And, if I'm usually prepared, but if I don't have food, I'll just fast, because going, whatever, I'll just eat the sandwich they have because I need food. Like, that's going to have disastrous effects, usually in the form of mucus, a heavy gut, headache, but if you consistently do that, I've seen it go into a terrible place for people. I've seen people get really deeply, good friend of mine, actually, he got really deeply into raw food, running, fasting, used to do fasts over 100 days. And then he would go back to his family's house, and because there would be bagels and stuff. He always kept it vegan. That was very important to him. Has a lot of discipline when it comes to vegan food. I guess spiritually, that's something that's very much in alignment with him. He doesn't want to consume anything from another being. Respect. Okay. But when he was going back home to visit his family, he would be like, eat some bagels or whatever. And then he would get all stuffy-nosed and messed up and whatever. And then he'd go back to where he was living, and he would start running again and juicing and, eating coconuts and all this stuff. He was living somewhere tropical. And he would kind of be okay, but have these crash and burn moments. But then at one point, he just couldn't do it emotionally anymore. And he was just back to eating cooked vegan food. Now, here's the interesting thing. In the early days, eating all that cooked vegan food and seitan and beans and chili and cornbread and of course salads and juices and stuff, but he was vegan ice cream and doing all that. He lost weight because he didn't start there. So that was an improvement for him. He lost weight, he felt good, then oh, there's a raw food movement. Oh, David Wolf wrote this book, The Sun Food Diet. Oh, wait, Dr. Bishy is I can do juice fasting. Oh, we evolved. We all learned together about these unfolding food concepts over the past 30 years. And he was getting into it, kicking ass, getting cleaner, body getting more efficient. And then he was like, I'm going to go back a little bit, a couple of steps. He did that. I don't know exactly what the weight is, but easily over 100 pounds of excess weight on his body. All sorts of health problems resulted. And he's eating the food that originally healed him. But he had gone so far into a cleansed state, and then he tried to introduce the heavier, more complicated foods later, and it had consequences. So that's why people that eat really clean, they would just rather fast. If you've done it long enough. I don't mean you've eaten clean for 3-4 months and then you crash and you go back. That's still not a great thing to do, but it's not as magnified as if you've done it for 25 years. And sometimes people get to a place like that. I remember I had one of my teachers told me, someone that's been eating a raw food diet for a very long time. He said when his brother died, he was very upset many decades ago. And he said he tried to eat some cooked food, and he said it just didn't work for him. It made him feel so bad. It made him feel so sick. But sometimes emotionally, we're just looking for it's harder to kind of thrive on the cleaner stuff, I guess. And people will look for something a little heavier, but it has consequences. Our bodies believe whatever we tell it. So when people do long juice fasts, the body starts to think, oh, we're going to put zero energy into nutrition and digestion, and we're going to divert all that energy throughout the body, and we're going to just clean everything up and feel amazing and live like that. And that's why refeeding is really important, and people get sick when they refeed too heavy. I mean, God, I've watched people do 100-day juice fast. I remember a friend of mine, Bobby Buns. Oh, he's been on the podcast before. I'm watching, I think it was Snapchat or something, and he was breaking my juice fast today. And I was like, oh, Bobby's did another juice fast. Oh, how many days? I think it was 100 days or something. And he was breaking it by spiralizing raw butternut squash and putting a thick, heavy cashew cream sauce all over it. And I couldn't get to him in time via social media on the messages. But I was like, dude, please don't eat that. And he was like, too late. No, you need to chew on some celery sticks. You need to there's a whole way to start reintroducing fiber to the intestine. You can't just pile in heavy macros. Anyway, so I feel like I've gone off in another direction, but the body believes what you tell it it's going to do. So whether you're eating clean or juice fasting or water fasting, when you come out of it, you have to sort of your body believes that it's adjusted to living in this highly efficient state. So going back and eating whatever food is going to hit you like a ton of bricks. I remember this when I was younger. I really wanted to smoke cigarettes because we watched the movie The Outsiders. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s in New York. And then I was born in the 70s. But I was kind of had a little more freedom come the 80s, 1985 on, 10 years old, 11, 12, 13. And the culture was smoking and drinking. And even my family, and my family were a bunch of sweethearts and stuff. But that, Sunday dinner at my Nana and Pop's house, big pot of sauce and Italian food, and after dinner, I'd be sitting in front of the television eating those weird little hard, disgusting candies in the shape of a shell that like grandma's had. I would be eating those disgusting things because that's all she had. And I used to eat Cool Whip out of the freezer, and then I'd get sick. And then I learned later that Cool Whip isn't ice cream or even whipped cream. It's just emulsified like seed oils and hydrogenated fats. I had no idea. I was like, 8 years old or whatever. But they would all play cards. They would sit at a table covered in smoke. Everybody smoking, playing cards, everybody gambling at the table after dinner, having dessert. And I think they had coffee. But like, that's the culture. So immediately I was like, I saw The Outsiders. My dad smoked. He doesn't smoke now, but everybody smoked except for my mom didn't smoke and my grandfather didn't smoke. But so I was like, God, I want to smoke. I used to steal my dad's cigarettes. And when I would really go out, all the other kids were smoking. And I used to get really sick from cigarettes. Like once I properly learned how to inhale and I wasn't just trying to be cool and I wasn't like doing that fake cigarette puff thing. And I used to get headaches, like awful headaches. I used to spit up and cough up things out of my chest that were bloody and orange and yellow and sometimes green looking. And like my body was pissed. Now, interesting. I started out eating horrible food, surrounded by secondhand smoke. Even my grandfather, who lived upstairs, would smoke cigars all day. And still, it was that much more intense taking a cigarette and actually pulling smoke into the body that I got sick. And I remember when I stopped because the body adapted to that. And I was so happy because I said, now I could go and smoke and hang out with the girls and look cool. And I'm not going to have to go home with this awful headache. My body flipped over into the acceptance and accommodation of the poison because our body will acclimate to whatever toxic environment that we're in. And then when we start going in the other direction, we cleanse it out and we have to start that process over again. Your body's not going to feel good. It's like me smoking at, 10 years old or 11, whatever it was. Start smoking, the body goes, holy shit, and you feel horrible. And then eventually it comes to a place of acceptance, even though you are unhealthier. It does come to that place of, that's why there's drug addicts right now functioning in the world. Their chemistry is totally poisoned, but they're out there walking around doing stuff. They're still alive. This is one of the reasons why I believe human beings and life in general is a spiritual experience, because when you look at nature and you look at humans we're very resilient. And what that does is it gives us the opportunity to experience, and it gives us many, many chances to mess up and to fix and to experience and to mess up and to fix and experience. So many people, have done things to their bodies where they should be dead. I used to hear about it from friends that worked in emergency medicine. They used to call what they call them, not formally, but they'll call them the cockroach people, because they never die. But they come in and you revive them, and then next week they come in and they've either OD'd again, or they have something, or they're somebody that's using drugs and alcohol, but they've not managed their diabetes, and they're in they're in some type of failure, or this or that or whatever, and they just keep saving them, and they know them. It's almost like they see them every week, every month, and it's like, why aren't they dying? It's amazing. They call them cockroach people, and that's the spiritual aspects of humanity. We're allowed to mess up, and we do this because of growth. Now, of course, obviously we can't do that forever, and things catch up with us, and people are dying younger and younger, and diseases are becoming more and more prevalent because we're becoming more and more and more and more out of balance with nature. But if any of these things killed people instantly, I mean, there'd be no opportunity for spiritual growth. It would just be like, oh, you had a bunch of alcohol, game over. Like it's just, you're smoking cigarettes and polluting your lungs and displacing oxygen, and game over, but no, people can smoke and drink for 40, 50 years. People can eat garbage food for 40, 50 or more years. And that's, in my belief, the spiritual aspect of life. Plenty of opportunity for growth, plenty of opportunity to correct, plenty of opportunity to mess up. How many of us were young people, took party drugs, binge drank, got blackout drunk, made bad decisions, ate ramen noodles and cheese fries at 4 o'clock in the morning because we were out partying all night. We all survived it, and then hopefully in our adult life, we have some realizations. We cleanse our system. We go through the pain and the change of that. We apply some discipline and some enthusiasm, and we get through the cravings, and we readjust our life to become more in alignment with nature and natural foods, and we have a tremendous growth process through all of that. Anyway, I think I just got a little weird on this podcast, but and I don't even know if I explained that as well as I wanted to. But when we backtrack, or when we first introduce toxic things, there are consequences to pay. And that's one of the reasons why I don't cheat. There's too many consequences. And to be honest, I've worked really hard at this lifestyle. Maybe I'm a little bit vain, but I know what happens, because in the early days, meaning the first few years I did this, I was 20, 21, 22. I do remember being out with some chef friends, because I became a natural food chef, and being out and having I think since I stopped drinking, I drank maybe 4 times, and they were all in the first 2 to 3 years that I stopped drinking. But that was a big deal because I used to drink every day. Then I didn't drink for a year and a half, and I drank once. And then I didn't drink for 6 months to a year, and then I drank once. But anyway, it's been almost 28 years since I've had a drink of alcohol. But anyway, in those first few years, I remember I had a couple of glasses of wine with them, and I was trying to live life a little bit. And God, the next day I was puffy and I had pimples, and my body responded quick, because I had been on this organic vegan diet and juicing and drinking water and not having alcohol for a while. And, my body responded quick. I didn't like it. I was like, no, I've worked too hard for this. And especially the older I get, I like to glow and to feel good and to have high energy. Why would I do anything to threaten that? And my life doesn't even allow for something like that. God, if anything happens, anybody gets sick in our family or anything, the ship starts going down. There's just too many responsibilities with everything that we're in charge of, between business and children and all the other things. No way is anybody going down. Definitely not going down from bad food decisions or anything like that. So so it doesn't come from a place of rigidity. It doesn't come from a place of intense discipline. It comes from a place of really understanding that there's consequences to that, and changing my microbiome and changing my pathways in my brain for pleasure. And once that happens, it just became a breeze, and there's no other way that I'd want to live. When I crave decadent things, I want durian. I think, oh, yeah, I'm going to do a little special thing. I'm going to order some durian from Year of the Durian. That's what I want, right? I don't think about going to what are these places? My mom, every time I go to my family event, my mother gets they get these cupcakes and things from a place called Mother Moose. I don't know if it's a chain. I don't know if it's specific to Staten Island or whatever, but they're just the richest, most decadent, dairy, white sugar, white flour, beautiful cupcakes and stuff. I don't even think about that stuff. And that is the short answer as to why I never cheat or anything like that. And I need a drink. Hang on. One thing I want to end with this one is I would highly recommend that everyone get really honest with themselves. I had to do it myself. I went on Dr. Fred Bishy's intermediate diet program. And what that was a very basic 60% raw food, 40% cooked food. This is 30 years ago when I first met him. And it was like, he didn't teach you how to season anything. This is why I made the broom cleanse and all those dressings and why I make food on Instagram. None of this existed. He gives you a bunch of handouts 30 years ago. And it has this beautiful outline of biochemical efficiency on it. And it doesn't teach you how to season stuff. It just, I didn't know what I was doing. And it was super clean. And it was super boring, to be honest. And I was this guy that was used to very stimulating things: Burger King pizza, Staten Island pizza, best pizza in the world, and macaroni and cheese, and drinking alcohol. And I would smoke. Like, all these things are very stimulating to the chemistry, and they light up all these pleasure centers. And now I'm eating like chickpeas and brown rice with a salad, but I didn't know how to make a salad dressing, and I didn't know to put salt on food. And I detoxed so hard when I first did this. But then I went to culinary school, the Natural Gourmet Institute for Food and Health. And while I was in the program for the first week, I was trying to eat a Dr. Bishy diet and learn about food and preparing food. But they were using a lot more condiments and seasonings and cooking food and things in the beginning. And I really wanted to immerse myself in this program and learn about natural food, cooking natural foods. And I just sort of had a little talk with myself, and I was like, you're like 22 or whatever right now, 21. I was like, you're going to have to immerse yourself in this program. You know what the super efficient way of doing things is. You know what simple eating is. But while you're in this program and while you're working as a chef, all this food is good. It's all vegan. It's all organic. It's all plant-based. It's all good stuff. Just be free. Make sure you have your juice every day. Make sure you have a meal of fresh fruits every day. Make sure that, you're drinking plenty of water. Good. I had my things that I took from that I took from Dr. Bishy, and I had a salad with every meal, and then I just loosened up a little bit, and I was like, this is where I'm at, and I love it, and I loved it, and I loved those years. And then as time went by, and I started to eat a little more simply, and especially once I became a colon hydrotherapist and I stopped working in kitchens and I started preparing my own food and I started simplifying everything, and then my body started pushing me forward. And yes, when I used to eat seitan and tons of tofu and tempeh and brown rice and all that kind of stuff, I was more congested and puffy. I was healthier than the guy that used to drink the 40 ounces and all that, but I was definitely still puffy, congested, and I can see how that heavier food affected me. And then my body started pushing me and it took time. And I was always cool with where I was at. I never struggled with food because I was like, I'm just going to eat what I love. I'm going to use my mind and the things I've learned. I'm going to apply it, always do the best quality that I can. And then through that time, my microbiome changed. The pleasure centers in my brain changed. I realized that through transition that I can recreate all these delicious, wonderful foods. I mean, you ever have a raw cacao brownie or one of those, make a lemon coconut smoothie or something they're delicious. I've made these coconut smoothies like vanilla and orange. It tastes like an orange creamsicle. So good. I've made salads that literally taste like a pizza, where I'm putting in sun-dried tomatoes and raw olives and all this great stuff. Amazing, amazing stuff. So I'm still creating a lot of these and celebrating a lot of these wonderful flavors and not needing to ever cheat because my diet is satisfying and it feels really good. And I know if I go back and eat some of that stuff for a cheap thrill of it, when I can recreate it with healthier things and have no effect, I know there's consequences to pay. So I encourage everyone to really get grounded into where you are and what you want to do. I've had clients, I can't eat like you, Mike. I'm a foodie. I like to go to the restaurant pop-up thing, and it's like, but then they struggle with food stuff or their body stuff or whatever. And I'm like, look, how about you just own what you love? Own what you love. Do all the good things you can. Juice in the mornings. Do the thing, own what you want to do and just go enjoy that food at the restaurant and just don't worry about it. Anyway, I think I went on a little bit too long about this, but told myself I'm not going to edit it. Thank you all for joining me for another podcast episode. I do have a bunch of episodes on the way. Still some of those episodes from before the pandemic. Live event with Dr. Bishy, still relevant today. Live event at Bombry Bodega when that was still around with Gil Jacobs. And I think I have one with Bobby Buns. And anyway, I'm going to be releasing those slowly. I appreciate you all. Please subscribe. Like on YouTube. Please subscribe on the podcast apps. Please leave a review if you can. It means the world to me and really helps the podcast. Anyway, hope you're all well. Thanks, guys. See you on the next one.